All right, so we are going to go ahead and dig in now. We do have quite a few topics we are going to cover today. We're going to talk about the plan design, how benefits are calculated. We're going to determine the options that members will have at retirement when filling out their paperwork. We're going to show you how to use our benefit estimator, and we're going to talk about reemployment and the application process. First, what is retirement? Here at NPERS, we like to say that retirement is when we stop living at work and begin to work at living. Our definition of retire is to begin a new, active, and involved chapter in life, starting new activities and setting new goals. Our mission statement is the Nebraska Public Employees Retirement System recognizes the importance of a successful retirement and is dedicated to providing the highest quality service necessary to assist members in achieving that goal. In short, what we want you to know is that we are here for you in this time. We realize that for a lot of you, there's like a green pasture of retirement just on the horizon. But in between you and getting there, there are a lot of decisions that need to be made, decisions that are going to be based on variables that you don't necessarily have all of the answers to. We say here a lot that the only way to create a perfect retirement plan is if you know exactly when when that retirement is going to end. And since none of us know that, it's going to be, we just have to do the best with what we have. And so we want to make sure, at least with the NPERS piece of your retirement, that you know how your plan works, you know how the options work, so that you can make the best decision for you and your family. With that in mind, this here is our contact information. I'd recommend keeping this information handy. Why? Well, because we have your money. And as a general rule, I like to have the addresses and phone numbers of everybody who's got their hands on my money. This is the office that you'll want to get a hold of when you're ready to apply for your retirement. We have our physical address on there, our mailing address, and our phone numbers there. If I ask you to call the call center, those are the two numbers that I'm asking you to call, and then our fax number as well. We also have our web address on there, which is npers.ne.gov. You will hear us mention our website about 47,000 times today because it does have quite a bit of information on it for our plan members to assist you with your retirement and your retirement planning. One thing I would like to point out is under the publications page on our website, you can find the School Plan Handbook. This is a nice resource for you along with this webinar to learn more about how your plan functions. The link to that is also in the chat right now. The website also has just a lot of other really good information on it. If you go to that publications and videos page and scroll down toward the bottom, you'll find that your plan has a newsletter that comes out every March and every September with just information and good tips about your plan as a school member. If you haven't seen those before, those are I would encourage you to go read them. We put a lot of work into them to give you some good information on there. That's on the publications and videos page. Our forms page, you can get any form that you would possibly need. And then the legislation page is one I also like to point out. Your plan is affected by what goes on in the legislature. It's sort of administered by the unicameral, so they can make changes to your plan there with legislation. You're welcome to watch, if you want to watch the unicameral on public access, that's a way you can keep up with what's happening in your plan, but that is extremely boring. And so we have people here in the office that pay attention to that stuff so that you don't have to. So if you go to that page, you can see in the past how legislation has changed the plans. You can see if there's anything currently coming up that could be voted on to change your plans, or the current things that are happening that have passed this year that change your plans. So I would highly encourage you to check that out if you haven't before. And then there's also the benefit estimators on our website. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in just a minute. But if you look up in the upper right hand corner there, you'll see a thing that says NPERS online account access and a button that says click to log in. You can make an online account with NPERS on our website. And if you're a school member, there's a lot of really important information for you that you can find if you have that account access. So if you can see what we have on file for your total years of service and all of your salary history on there if you have that account access. You can also see the individuals that you have listed as beneficiaries prior to your retirement. That's important because of all the things I might ask you to call the call center for. One thing they can't tell you over the phone is who your beneficiaries are. That's a violation of privacy law. And then once you do retire, there is some additional functionality for that online account. You can change your tax withholding on there, and you can also view your 1099-R, which is your year-end tax statement once you retire. But in order to create that account, what you do need to have is a valid email address, a social security number, and your retirement number. If you don't know your retirement number, that's completely normal. I don't know my retirement number, and I work here. Your retirement number can be found on your statement that you get every late July, August-ish. So if you look at last year's statement, your retirement number should be up at the top of that. If you don't have your retirement number, don't have an old statement, you can sure call into the call center and they'll tell you what your retirement number is over the phone. So I don't recommend opening this NPERS account for most of our plans, but with the school plan, it's going to be very helpful for you to have all of the information that we have available for you on there. And then our benefit estimator is a tool available to you on our website so you can get an idea of the kind of benefit you're looking at receiving when you retire. It's on the non-secure side of our site, so you do not need to log in to use the tool. You don't need to enter any sensitive personal information to use the tool, and none of the information that you do plug in is stored in any way. But to use the estimator, what you're going to do is you need to put in your date of birth, your anticipated termination date, and I want to break out and just talk about that for just a minute here. We're going to talk about two dates a lot today, those being your termination date and your effective date. Your effective date is the date that your benefits start. We'll break down how you establish one of those and all that later in the presentation. But when we talk about termination date, what we mean is the last day that you could be required to render service under your contract. So you'll put in when that estimated termination date is going to be, and then you're going to put in the date that you want your benefit to start. So again, that's your effective date. Then you're going to input the date range in which you started in the plan, as there are 4 different tiers and different options based on which tier you are in. A nice thing about the estimator is we do have these pop-up help screens at the end of most of these fields. So if you're wondering what it is we're asking for, it'll give you a little bit more information of what we're looking for in that particular box if you click on those help screens. After you do all that, you're going to enter your 3 or your 5 highest estimated annual salaries. That depends on which tier you're in. And then you're going to enter your account balance. Just as a side note, this is optional. You don't have to know your account balance to use our estimator because your account balance does not play in to the amount of benefit you'll receive. You know, your monthly benefit is based on a formula, but none of those formula factors are your account balance. Your account balance does come into play with one particular of our death benefit options, so that's the reason it's asking for it. But if you don't know it, you can still use the benefit estimator. And then you'll enter your beneficiary type. And then after you fill all of this in, you're going to get a list of options. All of these options here where it says option 1, life only, option 2, modified cash refund. Those are links that'll take you to the place in the handbook that defines what those options mean. I'm not going to break those down right now because Heather's going to spend about an hour talking about what all of those do here later in our presentation. But then for each one you get an estimate of what you'd be looking at if you chose that based on the information you gave the estimator for a monthly amount. So Do remember that this is an estimate, it's not a quote. It is only as good as the information that you put into it. I do like to point out that on the lower right hand corner there's an icon where you can print out estimates if you desire. As you're making these decisions, as you're talking with your spouse, your family, your financial advisor, I would encourage you to play with this estimator. See what it would be like if you retired at maybe you're someone who qualifies for the rule of 85. See what it would be like if you retired at age 55 with the rule of 85. See what it would be like if you got 5 more years of service credit in. Just have a list, just have several different estimates ready when you're making those decisions so that you can make the best one for your family. Print those out so that you can have them on hand when you're having those conversations. All right, how do you apply for retirement? What is the time frame you are looking at? Well, the first thing I want you to know is that you don't have to do anything until you are ready to retire. So if you're 50 and you're no longer with the school system, or you're going to retire at 60 but you don't want to begin drawing that benefit until you're 65, you don't need to contact us until you're ready to begin drawing your benefit. So I do want to take just a quick minute here to talk about your effective date. Your effective date is the day that you want to begin drawing your benefit. You establish your effective date by contacting our office, by filling out and sending in your application, and by ceasing employment for a Nebraska public school. So once you're ready, you'll want to call NPERS up to 6 months and no less than 1 month prior to your retirement. An office visit is not required. That's a common misconception. You don't need to have an office visit. We do offer them, but you don't have to have one. Most retirement balls get rolling with a phone call. And if you do have that office visit, by the way, all they're going to do is sit with you and make sure you fill out your paperwork correctly. It's not like no advising or anything like that. It's just strictly making sure that you fill out your paperwork correctly. But once you do give us a call, once we get that retirement ball rolling, we're going to go ahead and review your work history and your salary and your years of service. We're going to create an estimate of your benefits, and your retirement packet will be mailed to you 30 to 45 days prior to your effective date. You then need to complete and mail your application for retirement into NPERS. And that is how the timeline works. So it's pretty easy. Bullet points are when you're ready, you need to contact us. If you're going to leave the school system and you're not yet retirement age, you don't need to call us and tell us what you're doing. That money is just going to stay there waiting for you to be ready for it. But you'll call us, 1 to 6 months before you want to start getting your benefit. We're going to mail you that packet prior to your effective date, and then your effective date is established once you fill out and send in that application and cease employment for a Nebraska public school. So it used to be that people thought of retirement as like a three-legged stool. A lot of you have probably heard that analogy before. You have three firm legs on your retirement stool: your Social Security, your personal savings, and your pension plan. Over the years, we've seen a couple of pegs on that stool maybe be a little bit more rickety than they have been in years past. And a lot of times, we're seeing pension plans not necessarily be built up as much as they used to. Maybe it's because you didn't work at the same place your whole career, and so it didn't get built up like, it used to be. People worked at the same job their entire careers, and so it had a chance to build up. Maybe that's not you. My biggest financial blunder as far as retirement goes was when I worked for an insurance company before I worked for the state. I won't mention which one. They are known to brag about being like a good neighbor, but their retirement program was optional. And when I was there, I still have young kids, but when I was there, I had very young kids, and I thought, well, I need that 50 bucks a month now more than I do when I'm 65, and that was incorrect. I did not. I should have been putting into that. So I'm playing catch up now. So there are reasons for that. That stool on a lot of people's retirement, or that leg on people's retirement stool, is getting either not there or, a lot less solid. And then, savings were just in general, we're a lot worse at savings than we used to be. This can be for reasons that are beyond our control. Inflation not keeping up with wages is a big reason that a lot of people can't save. If you didn't get I believe about an 8%, 7-8% raise this year. Your dollar is worth less right now than it was a year ago this time, right? And so, that can eat into our savings account some. Not only are we not able to save as much as we used to, but maybe you have to kind of start nibbling away at the savings you do have because your wages aren't keeping up with what everything's costing. Um, I went to the grocery store the other day. I bought a dozen eggs and a gallon of milk, and it was 8.50. 8.50 for a dozen eggs. So that those are prices that can eat into your savings quite often. And that's beyond our control. There's the reasons for not saving that are maybe good reasons for not saving. I still pay a little bit of money every month for my student loans. And that would be money that could be going to savings if I didn't have that payment. But also, you know what? I'm pretty proud of the fact that I was able to finish school. I think that was a good career move for me and a good thing that I did. So I think, that's a good reason, I guess. But then there's also the bad reasons. My neighborhood at home, it just seems like there's like an arms race to see, which neighbor's going to have the nicest travel trailer, or, maybe you need to have the nicest deck or the best yard, sort of keeping up with the Joneses reason. That's not a great reasons to be bad at saving. Personally, for me, I'm terrible at savings because 15 years ago, my wife and I moved into a house that was only 6 blocks away from a Popeyes, and I still haven't figured out how to drive by that place on my way home without getting some spicy chicken for dinner. So, for whatever reason, we just don't save like we used to. And so, as that's happened, is that more and more, two of those legs on the stool have gotten smaller or disappeared altogether. And we see people putting a whole lot of faith into Social Security and maybe a little bit of luck to fund their retirement. And that's a problem because Social Security as a program is only designed to replace about 35 to 40% of your income. So what we're seeing is a lot of people having to add a fourth leg to that stool, and that being outside earnings from a job to their retirement plans. And you know what? If that's what you want to do, I think that's wonderful. My mom she's currently an administrative assistant. She has been doing that for most of my life. She not only does it for a living, she's done it on volunteer basis for nonprofits in the area or at churches she's attended before, just because she loves it. It's just something that really sort of lights her fire. So, you know what? She's going to retire about this time next year. And there's not a doubt in my mind that she's going to retire. She'll spend maybe 3-4 days at home, and she's going to go and find a job, find an office that needs 10, 20 hours a week of office work, and just to do that for a little extra income because it's something that she very much enjoys. That's part of her retirement plan. So that's wonderful. But what's sad is when all you want to do is go fishing, or all you want to do is hang out with the grandkids or travel with your spouse, but you can't because you have to put a shift in at a job that you have. So that's what we want to avoid, is we want to avoid having to do that if you don't want to. So that is why it's important to stay informed and to take control of your retirement. It is nice in these school webinars to be preaching to the choir a little bit because everyone on this call presumably has at least two legs on that stool with your Social Security and your defined benefit plan, both of which are designed to provide you with that lifetime monthly benefit. It is important to note that as we go on here, what we're talking about is your money that no one else has access to. Bankruptcy, financial hardship, can't touch this money. The only ways that someone could possibly get access to your pension is in the event that you run into some trouble with the IRS or with like a divorce situation. So we like to say if you keep the tax man and your spouse happy, you don't have to worry about this money and not being there for you when you retire. I like to recommend that you marry the tax man and then you only have to keep one person happy. But this money that you contribute, it is invested and available to you only when you quit or retire. It has no Social Security offset, meaning the amount of your benefit does not affect the amount of your Social Security payment or vice versa. So we're going to go ahead and start talking about the design of the plan now. You will hear Heather and I talk about your plan today with a tinge of jealousy because it is a very good plan. It's a great plan. You have what we lovingly refer to as the Cadillac of retirement plans. As a state employee, I have what I don't lovingly refer to as the Chevy Cavalier of retirement plans, because, unlike you, whatever money I have when I retire is what I have to last me the rest of my life. And so I'm constantly checking on that to decide, to see how is this building up, how is this growing, am I going to be able to retire at a decent age? Because we have that 401k style plan. It's not a 401k, but it is that style where whatever I save, with my mandatory contributions and other avenues that we have here for state workers is all that I have once I do retire. But that's not how your plan works, because your plan is a lot different than mine. That balance doesn't matter, as I've already mentioned at least once. The type of plan that you have as a Nebraska Public School employee is called a defined benefit plan. And when you have a defined benefit plan, your retirement benefit is a lifetime monthly pension check. The amount of that check is determined by a formula that's based on several factors, but none of those factors is your account balance. Um, Heather will talk about this a little bit later, but I have my wife's grandpa was in the plan. He passed away a couple of weeks ago, was in the plan for 32 years, and he got that lifetime monthly check long after that account balance was exhausted. For 32 years, I believe his account balance was exhausted in about 1998. So for about 24 years, he still got payments after that. That's the great thing about your plan. Your plan, the formula that determines your benefit is based on these factors here on the slide. And the two biggest factors that we're going to talk about today are your salary and your years of service. We will go through all of these and mention how they affect the benefit calculation, but it is important to note that the unicameral has made changes to the school retirement plans over the years and created different tiers of benefits. We will talk about how you can know which tier you are in, and we'll talk about how these have changed over time here as we keep going on. But let's talk about funding before we really get there. Your plan is funded in 4 ways. First, it's funded by your contributions. Currently, that's going to be 9.78% of your gross salary. Your employer then matches that contribution at 101%, and then the state of Nebraska chips in 2% of your salary. The rest of this money is invested, and the majority of the funding for your plan comes from the returns on those investments. And as I have mentioned a couple of times as we go on and talk about the formula, 2 of the biggest pieces of that formula are going to be your salary and your years of service. One great place to find what information we have about your salary and years of service, so you can know where you stand, is your annual statement that we mail out every year. Another great place is if you have that online account access, you can check on that there. But on your account statement, you will find what we have on record for your compensation for the last year and what we have on record for you for your career of service credit. I would highly recommend opening this up and reviewing that information for accuracy. Make sure that we're just telling you exactly what your school has reported to us for your salary and your years of service. So if you might want to look at that, the people who report this to us, I can tell you I get to work with them a little bit, and they have a lot of balls in the air that they are juggling all the time. So it is possible that they might accidentally report it incorrectly. So you want to make sure what you have on file for your own salary for that year, what you have on file for how many hours you put in, make sure that lines up with what you have on your statement there. If it doesn't, we want to we want you to contact us so we can work that out to make sure you're getting everything that you deserve as far as salary and years of service. We want you to get credit for everything you deserve there. You can also find your beneficiaries that we have on file for you on that account statement, which again is something you can't find out through the call center. And you can make sure that we have your address on file correctly on that annual statement. If you don't get the annual statement, that might be a good indication that we don't have the correct address for you. But that becomes extremely important once you do retire, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. And then taxes, your current contributions that you make to your plan are made before you've paid taxes on that money. Since you haven't been taxed on current contributions, you will have to pay taxes when you begin drawing your pension. But if you are someone who's been in the plan long enough that you were making contributions prior to 1986, those contributions were made after tax, so you already paid taxes on those. Those contributions will come back tax-free. The way that we're going to pay that back is called the safe harbor method, and how it works is it's not going to come back in a lump sum, but you'll just get a little bit tax-free in each monthly check. How much is based on actuarial tables used to guess how long you're going to live. But here, looking at this chart, so let's say if you retired at 55 and you had added $5,000 in pre-1986 contributions, we're going to divide that by 360 payments, assuming you live 30 years after that, and $13.89 of your benefit check would be tax-free every month. So if you had a $1,000 benefit, $13.89 of that would be non-taxable income, and $986.11 would be taxable income. So that's how that works if you've been in the plan long enough that you made contributions prior to 1986. We do have a pretty young group today, so I don't think that applies to anybody in here, but nevertheless, that's how it works. But like I mentioned, the money that you've contributed to the plan since 1986 is pre-tax. You haven't paid state or federal income tax on those contributions. That means when you begin taking money out of your retirement, it's considered taxable income. How are these taxes withheld? It's basically going to be withheld the same way you have your taxes withheld right now, from your earnings. So when you begin working for an employer, you fill out a W-4, which tells them how much you want withheld from your paycheck for taxes. And then at the end of the year, you get that W-2, which you use to calculate the amount of taxes that you're either going to have to pay in, or if you had enough withheld, the amount of your refund. This is basically going to work the same way with your pension. In your retirement packet, there will be a tax withholding form where you tell us how much you want withheld for Nebraska and federal income tax from your monthly pension check. You can change that withholding at any time, and we're automatically going to withhold at that rate from every check. Now, it is important to note that if you move to another state, like if you were to move to Iowa for some reason, I don't know why you would, but people make bad decisions every day, we can't withhold state income taxes for another state. So you would need to contact the Department of Revenue for Iowa and say, hey, I have this taxable benefit, and I'm a resident of your state now. And then you would want to contact NPERS, let us know, hey, I moved to Iowa. We would cry with you on the phone as long as you needed us to, but then we would also stop taking out your Nebraska state taxes. So that's how that works. And then at the end of the year, much like you get a W-2 now, we send you with something called a 1099-R, which you then use to do your taxes and figure out if you get a refund or if you have to pay in. So now, as we do dig into that formula that determines your benefit, the first component we're going to talk about is salary, and this is one of those areas where which tier you're in matters, and you can tell which tier you're in by which date you entered into the plan. So if you join the plan before July 1st, 2013, you are in Tier 1. If you joined the plan on or after July 1st, 2013, but before July 1st, 2017, you are in Tier 2. If you join on or after July 1st, 2017, but before July 1st, 2018, you are in Tier 3. And then if you joined on or after July 1st, 2018, you are in Tier 4. And when we're looking at your salary, if you fall under that original tier of benefits, we're going to look at your 3 highest 12-month periods to determine that benefit. If you're in the tiers 2, 3, or 4, we're going to look at your 5 highest 12-month periods to determine your benefit. And when we look at 12-month periods, the way we calculate this is we look at your final payroll date and count back 12 months from that moment. So this creates your first 12-month period. And then we're going to continue to count back through your entire work history until we get all of the 12-month periods. And then we're just going to pick the 3 highest if you fall under that tier 1. If you're under tiers 2, 3, or 4, we're just going to pick the 5 highest. They don't have to be the last years that you worked, and they don't have to be consecutive. We're going to go through your entire work history to pick the highest, and then we're going to average those to create your average final salary and compensation. Now, it is important to note that compensation increases will be capped at 8% per year when we are calculating your retirement benefit. So for example, let's say in 2020 I made $50,000, and then in 2021 I got a $5,000 raise to $55,000. So that's an actual 10% salary increase in your pocket for that year. But when we're going back for the purposes of the benefit calculation, we have to cap that at an 8% increase. So for purposes of that calculation, that year would be averaged at $54,000. Now, maybe this year I get another raise, but it's only $1,000, so my salary is $56,000. Well, that's less than 8% higher than last year's calculation of $54,000, so that capping would fall off the previous year. The reason that this is done is to curb the practice that some people were doing in their last 5 years of sort of working a lot of overtime and extra duties to kind of jack up that average for the benefit calculation, and so to discourage that practice they put in the capping. With that being the case, one good news about capping is that only matters in your last 5 years of employment. That's the only time we go back and do the capping. So maybe in 2002 you went from being part-time employee at $25,000 a year to a full-time employee at $60,000 a year. Well, that was more than 5 years past, so you're not going to be capped on that. It's only in the past 5 years. So then after we do the average final salary and compensation, the next step is to look at how many years of service you've accrued in the plan. Service time is granted for time worked while contributions were being made to the retirement plan. This service time is verified to us by your employer. If you decide to take a lump sum payment for unused sick leave, this does not count as service time or salary. If you took a refund at some point, you left the school system, you took a refund of your retirement account, came back later, well, this erased the service credit that you had in your first time. We'll talk about that more here in just a minute. But under the current statute, 1,000 hours of work creates 1 year of service credit. So once you have worked 1,000 hours, you've reached the maximum amount of service credit you can receive for that year. Now, but what if you only work part-time, maybe from July 1st to June 30th? You only had 500 hours of service time. Well, if you're participating in the plan as a part-timer, you would get partial service credit for those 500 hours. So with that 500 hours, you would get a half a year of service credit. So we calculate all the service credit that you've accrued over your lifetime, and we use that when we calculate the amount of your benefit. If you are someone who does have fractional service, maybe you have like 22 and a half years or something like that, we do look at your fractional age when using the rule of 85. I'll talk about that more here in a minute. It is possible that you might get service credit for prior military service. That is pretty rare, but you can find it explained in the manual on page 9 or in your seminar materials on page 11. But as we just mentioned, if you previously quit work in the public school system and took a refund of your retirement account, your service credit was erased. If you return to work in the school system, you have the one-time option of repaying that refund to restore the service credit, provided you meet the following conditions. First, you must be a regular employee contributing to the plan. Second, your application for purchase of refunded service form must be received by NPERS within 5 years of reemployment and at least 1 year prior to termination. And finally, repayment must be completed within 5 years of reemployment or prior to termination, whichever is earlier. Service credit will be restored in proportion to the amount paid. Paying this amount in full also might potentially return you to prior tier status. Everybody has the option to purchase service credit. Why would you do this? Well, for starters, the more service time you have, the higher your monthly benefit. So if you're going to go to that benefit estimator and you're going to play around with it, you're going to see as you add more service time, the numbers aren't exponentially more, but they're significantly more the more years of service credit that you have as far as your monthly benefit goes. So maybe paying for some service credit a little bit at the beginning is going to pay off down the road with a larger benefit. Or one reason we see a lot of people do it is maybe paying for a little extra service time would allow you to meet the rule of 85 a little earlier. So maybe you're 55 years old and you've got 29 years of service credit. Well, buying that 1 year would allow you to reach that rule of 85 a year earlier. So there are 3 ways that you might be able to purchase service credit. Those are that you can purchase service for time that you missed during a leave of absence. For that option, you can purchase time equal to the leave up to 4 years. The second way is you can also purchase time for years spent working for an out-of-state public school system or for Omaha public school system. So for that option, you can purchase service time equal to the time you spent working for that system up to 10 years. And then everybody just has the option in their last year of employment or their last year leading up to retirement to purchase 5 additional years of service credit. So details about what conditions you need to meet to make these purchases can be found on pages 14 and 15 of your seminar packet there. We do have a service credit estimator on our website where you can see how much it would cost to purchase service credit for out-of-state OPS service or for that 12-month pre-retirement service purchase. You're going to find it under the school link under Plan Info. But when you open up the estimator, you're going to put in there what type of service you want to purchase. You're going to put in your date of birth and when you begin participating in the plan. And then click Next. And then here on this page, you're going to put in your anticipated termination date with your benefits start date. And then on the next page here, you're going to enter your total years of service and your highest 12-month period of salary. So here in our example, we have a member who's 55 years old with 27 years of service. We can see on this next page here, they're trying to see how much it would cost to purchase those 3 years it would take to reach the rule of 85. So then on this last page here, you can put in how many years or how many months you wish to purchase. If you go to this next page, after you click Next, when you put in how many years you want to purchase, you're going to get your estimate. So you can see that to purchase 3 years of extra service time would cost almost $56,000 for this particular individual that we've made up for the estimator. By the way, it's going to be different for everybody. This isn't what it costs for everybody, but that does seem like a lot of money because that is a lot of money. I don't have $56,000. If I needed $56,000 in a pinch, the only person I know who has that much money is Heather, and I don't think she's going to lend it to me. So I would, whatever. If someone were to lock me in a trunk and say you can get out when you have $56,000, I would probably die in that trunk. But you have to remember when you're paying the $56,000, when you're paying whatever it is that you have to pay for that service time, you're not only paying what you would have paid for those years or months, you're paying what your school would have paid, that 101% match, and the state of Nebraska, that 2% salary match as well. So that's the School Purchase of Service Estimator. Really good tool for you if you're thinking about making that extra service time purchase. And now we're going to talk about eligibility. There are specific things that have to happen in order for you to begin receiving that lifetime monthly benefit. The first one is that you have to terminate employment at all participating employers. That seems like it should be pretty easy. We're finding out that it's not. It feels like working for a Nebraska public school is a little bit like working for, the Don Corleone and the Godfather. Like, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me right back in, right? So Heather's going to talk about termination a lot a little bit later, but the next three I'm going to break out and talk about now. Those are, if you want to be eligible, you have to be vested in the plan, you need to attain retirement age, and you have to establish an effective date. So let's begin with vesting. Most individuals will vest themselves by incurring 5 or more years of service credit in the plan. If you're not vested, if you don't have enough service credit, you're only eligible for a refund, and a refund will not include the employer's match portion. But once you are vested in the plan, you're eligible to receive that lifetime monthly pension when you reach retirement age. And now, when we talk about retirement age, first thing you need to know is we're looking at the age that you've attained on your effective date of retirement. So in other words, we don't look at when you quit working. We look at the age you've attained when you begin drawing your benefit. And so your age is going to determine whether you're eligible for a full unreduced benefit, or if you started early, if there's going to be a benefit reduction. So let's begin by talking about the unreduced benefit. In your plan, normal retirement age is 65. So once you attain the minimum age of 65, if you've terminated employment and you're vested, you can begin drawing an unreduced lifetime benefit. Full stop. 65, normal retirement age, retire with a full benefit. But then your plan also has a second way that you can get that unreduced lifetime benefit. It's known as the Rule of 85. The Rule of 85 states that once you attain the minimum age of 55, this is for tiers 1, 2, and 3, from that point on, if your age plus your total years of service credit equal 85 or greater, you can cease employment and begin drawing an unreduced benefit at that age. Tier 4 also has the Rule of 85, but the minimum age for that is age 60. So earlier, if you remember, I said that we look at your fractional age when we're looking at the Rule of 85, and what that means is if you're 55 years old and you have 29 years of service, you would not need to work until you're 56 with the 30 years of service to be able to meet that Rule of 85. Once you reach the age of 59 and a half, if you had 29 and a half years of service credit, 59 and a half or 55 and a half plus 29 and a half equals 85. So we do look at your fractional age and your fractional service credit to meet this Rule of 85. But I do think it's important just to mention this is a second way that you can get that unreduced benefit. A lot of people conflate those two things. They think they have to reach the 65 and the Rule of 85 in some way, but that is not the case. Once you reach 65, if you have those years of vesting in the plan, you can retire with a full unreduced benefit. You do not need your service time to equal the Rule of 85. But now, what if you're never going to meet the Rule of 85? Maybe you're 60 and you have 10 years of service credit, but you've decided that you want to cease employment. So you're not at the Rule of 85, right? 60 plus 10 is 70. I did take off my shoes to make sure that was correct to count before we started here. So you're not going to meet the Rule of 85, and you haven't attained that minimum that retirement age of 65. But under your plan, you can begin reduced benefits early from ages 60 to 64 if you're vested in the plan and have terminated employment, but there is going to be a benefit reduction. And that benefit reduction is 3% for every year you're under the age of 65. So in our example, if that individual terminated employment at age 60 with 10 years of service credit, they would have a permanent 15% reduction in their lifetime benefit. Now, that seems kind of steep, but you have to remember, does that mean that it's always a bad idea to to wait until you're 65? You know what? Absolutely not. I like to think of it as, if you're 60, you start taking your benefit with 15% reduction. If you wait 5 years at 65, you have no reduction. But you know what? If you took it at 60, you would already be 60 payments ahead of what you would be if you had started at 65. So that could be possibly the correct decision for you. It just depends on your own personal health history, maybe your family health history, your financial goals, that sort of thing. That's the sort of stuff that needs to be discussed with your family, financial provider, everything like that. So, and then finally, I'm going to talk about the effective date here for a minute. When should you apply for benefit? This is the final step of eligibility. An effective date is when your benefits begin, and you do have to submit your completed retirement application to establish an effective date. Your effective date is going to be the first of the month following the occurrence of three things. So first, you're eligible for benefits. So when you refer back to what we just talked about, that means you're vested in the plan and you've reached age requirements. Secondly, you've terminated employment. And third, your completed retirement application is received in our office. So again, once all three of those things occur, the first of the month following will be your effective date of retirement. Now, it does usually take 3 calendar months for you to receive your first paycheck, but that first check would be retroactive to your effective date. So if it did take those 3 calendar months, it would be, for 3 months worth of benefit. Some school members might see a preliminary benefit, and what we're doing in that situation is we're still waiting on the final compensation and service credit information from your employer. But it's taking a little bit longer, and we realize that everybody has a certain amount of time they can go without a check before they have to start looking at shady websites about selling their kidney or whatnot. And so in that situation, we want to start processing a benefit for you. So we use the data that we have to give you about a 95% preliminary benefit. And then once we get the final information from your school, we go ahead and recalculate and make sure you've gotten everything you should have gotten to that point. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about here before I let you go splash water on your face or go do burpees in your little home gym or whatnot to wake up is the COLA. The COLA is a really nice feature of your benefit. It stands for Cost of Living Adjustment. This is an annual adjustment that occurs every July. It's handled by the retirement office here. You don't have to apply for it. It's a benefit increase that's based upon the annual change in consumer price index, or the CPI. In other words, it's based on inflation. Now, Tier 1 and Tiers 2, 3, and 4 have different COLA provisions. I'm going to switch the slide here. But under Tier 1, the maximum increase that you're eligible for a COLA is 2.5%. So maybe inflation is calculated at 1% for the year using that CPI. That means you're eligible for a 1% increase in your July check. But let's say inflation was higher that year. Maybe it's like this year, where when the calculation was made, I believe it was about 7%. In that scenario, Tier 1 members would get the maximum 2.5% for their increase. Now, in that example, you might, if you're a math person here, you might have just quick done the math in your head and thought, well, that 2.5% is nice, but if inflation's 7%, my dollar that was worth 100 pennies last year is now only worth 95.5 pennies, because I lost 4.5% of my purchasing power with that COLA. Well, that's something that's tracked here in our retirement office. The state statute says under Tier 1 that you have to maintain at least 75% of your original purchasing power. So if at any time someone's loss of purchasing power reaches 25% or more, when that threshold is reached, that individual would get the full CPI increase for that year, which in the example we just gave you, like if that happened this year, would be about a 7% increase in their benefit. So that's how Tier 1 is handled. For Tiers 2, 3, and 4, the maximum cost of living increase is reduced to 1% from the 2.5%, and there is no 75% purchasing power with Tiers 2, 3, and 4. So again, that's the COLA, and the COLA is here to help you retain your purchasing power throughout those retirement years.
My name is Heather Critchfield Smith, and like Jeremy said, I am the Manager of Education Services. I am also, I've been employed with NPERS for 11 years. I didn't always do training. I started out in the mailroom here, and I kind of worked my way up from there. So I worked in the mailroom. I've done data services processing, which means I've entered in a bunch of beneficiary information, taxes, direct deposits. I worked for retirement processing, so I've calculated annuity benefits. I've paid death payouts, just done a lot of different things here in the office, and now I do training. I'm very happy to have this new avenue to talk to people. We really love doing these webinars for people. We think it makes our information a lot more accessible. So I want to thank you for being a part of that. It is kind of a big deal for us to move into this kind of new technological situation. And I know some people were forced into it, but we jumped in and we're excited about it. So we're going to get started here. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of different things. I'm very personally invested with the success of our retirees in the school plan, and there's a great reason for that. My grandmother was a special education teacher in Broken Bow, and my mom receives a pension under this plan. She taught in a bunch of different places, Macy, Gordon, a little town called Lamar out by Imperial. So we've been all over the state. This Nebraska pension plan, our defined benefit plan for our teachers, for our administrators, for our custodians, our lunch ladies, our bus drivers, anybody else that works in the school, is a great benefit. And understanding that can help you have a very peaceful, secure retirement. So that's what we're going to get started doing here, is get you on track for that. When I start talking about this, I talk a lot about successful retirements that I've seen, because even before I worked for NPERS, I also came from a place that did insurance and did that for about 10 years. A lot of different financial processing in my background. Now, what I can tell you is that the most successful retirees go in with two things. And if you don't have those two things right near, you might want to get on top of having those. One of those, number one, you go into retirement and you have a tax strategy. When you have a tax strategy, you understand your payments, you understand the taxation on those payments, that's going to help you in retirement. Because then you're going to be able to say, hey, this is the type of payment and taxation that I can understand and take with me. This is going to help me to keep more of my money in my pocket. And in retirement, that's exactly what we're focused on doing, keeping as much of our money in our pockets, and not losing that to taxation because we didn't have a strategy. Another thing is an investment strategy. And yeah, with this plan, you certainly don't have to do any kind of investing. The Nebraska Investment Council does that. But it's important that you know and understand investing. And sometimes it's important to have a little money set aside in different things and vehicles that run in conjunction with your retirement plan. We do talk briefly about a lot of different things today. So that's kind of one of the things to take away from this. As we get closer to retirement, our investment strategies do tend to become a little bit more conservative because we are concerned about capital preservation. We want to have as much of our money available to us at that point in time as possible. I don't know if you've been watching the market this week, but it's been interesting. So we're brushing over some other things we can do pre-retirement to help. Um, One thing I did want to address, this plan, this defined benefit plan, is something we call a 401A. And if I were writing things down at home, that's one of the things that I would write down, 401A, because that's the IRS coding for the rules that apply to the type of money in this plan. So if I wanted to kind of understand it a little bit better, or if I had questions later after this webinar, I might type into my Google search bar, can I do a rollover from a 401A, blah, blah, blah. But that's a good way to know. So take that with you. This is a 401A, not K, A. What that means to you is this money, the contributions and employer match and everything comes in here pre-tax, hasn't been taxed. So pre-tax money comes into this account. There's growth, and then the payments that come to you in retirement are taxed at that point in time. Okay, that's part of our tax strategy, that we understand that. We also know there's a lot of people that like to work for a real long time in these positions. We have a lot of very dedicated people who like to be around the kids, who do a great job. If you're planning on staying in your job for a long time, there is something that you need to know about 401A plans, and that is that they are subject to RMDs. An RMD is a required minimum distribution. With a required minimum distribution, what that means is essentially that's the government taking a look at your really beautiful pre-tax retirement plan and going, hey, it'd be a shame if somebody were to tax that. So what they do is they tell you if you haven't accessed the funds in that account by a certain age, and if your birthday was after July 1st, 1949, then your age is 72 right now. RMD ages can change per legislation and federal legislation. So it's something we watch pretty carefully. But right now, most people, it's 72. So what that means is if you haven't taken your benefit at age 72, or you're working past age 72, you need to be aware that because of the RMD, the required minimum distribution, you may be on a fast track timeline to take your benefit. The reason that's important is if you miss your RMD deadline, you can lose access to a lifetime benefit under this plan. Now, that one's really important, so I'm going to say it again. If you miss your RMD deadline, you can lose access to taking a lifetime monthly benefit under this plan. And that, honestly, that is the benefit of this plan. So you have to be aware of those timelines. We don't want anyone to miss out on getting a lifetime monthly benefit. Okay, so on our website, we realize that RMDs can be kind of confusing. So we made a handout. And if you go to your school plan page, there's something that says RMDs, or required minimum distributions. It's like a one-page handout, but if you're considering working past age 72 or up to 72, this is the time for you to take a look at that handout and read through it. Just make sure you understand your timelines, because we don't want you to miss out on that benefit. That's a huge difference to us. The people that work at NPERS, this is kind of important. We're not financial planners. That's why we can't give you any kind of advice on what you should do for your individual situation. There are people who take a lot of schooling and get a lot of certifications so that they can do that. We get to educate you about what's on offer and the options that you have. However, I don't get to advise you at any point in time to do something specific. Okay, and that's a legal thing. That's not an us thing. However, we are fiduciaries for this plan, and what that means to you is that I have your best interest in mind. I have to. That's part of my job. So if I see tips or tricks or pitfalls that I see with other retirees, I will mention them as we go along. Okay. Now remember, if you have questions, you can type those into the Q&A box. Jeremy's going to be fielding questions while I do my part of the presentation, but we will have a question and answer period kind of before the next break. All right. All right, that's a lot of information in a couple of minutes here. The next thing that we're going to talk about, and I'm sure you're like, Heather, why haven't you progressed the slide at all? Well, because the next thing we're going to talk about is what I love to talk about, and it's the benefit payment options under this plan. When you retire, when you get that effective date established, and how do we do that again? We do our three things. We terminate employment. We establish our vesting. Okay, so we're vested, we meet our age requirements for whatever we want. We submit our completed application to the office. That establishes your effective date. And Jeremy said it in a bunch of different ways while he was talking. But essentially, you do those three things. You establish your effective date. Now, on that completed paperwork, you're going to choose a lifetime monthly benefit option. I'm going to tell you up front, if you take even just one thing from this webinar today, let it be the fact that any option you pick that I'm about to talk about, and we're going to talk about all of these, is going to pay you, the member, a lifetime monthly benefit. What that is, it's going to give you a check every month for the rest of your life. That's a great thing. Social Security will do that for you as well, but essentially this is this functions the same way. Okay, it's a check every month for the rest of your life. So you're looking at all these options, and I'm sure you're saying to yourself, well, Heather, how are these different then? Well, they're different in the probability that we're going to pay a death benefit out under each one of these. And there's that probability, and to who. Okay, that's how they're different. So with that in mind, let's talk about how each and every one of these functions. Okay. The first one we're going to talk about is the easiest one to talk about, and that is the life only option. And the way that that one works is once you've established your effective date, we're going to start giving you payments, one payment a month for the rest of your life. But when you end, it ends. Okay. So there's zero probability that we're going to pay a death benefit out under this option. When you fill out the application for this one, you don't even get to put a beneficiary down because we're not paying a beneficiary. When you end, it ends. Okay. So with this one, can this scenario play out? Yes, it can. This is a scenario that happens occasionally. You ready for it? Let's say, pay into the plan for 30 years of employment. There's 30 years of contributions in there. And you elect to have the life only option. Okay. And you are super excited because things are going great. You're retired. You're finally, not working and having a good time. And you go out for your, get your mailbox. You open that mailbox to get your second monthly benefit check out because you're going to go put it in the bank, and you're dancing around because you're so excited, and you get hit by well, in the school seminars, we say school bus, but that's no offense to any of the great bus drivers that we may have on the call. I got cousins out in order that are bus drivers, and that's not easy. So, but anyway, you're not paying attention. You get hit by the bus. You're done. You're toast. There are no more payments, and we don't pay out to any beneficiary. So some people get real upset at the fact that you've paid for 30 years into this plan and you got two payments. Well, that's kind of how things roll. Annuities are based on guesses and factors and things like that. We can't say that everybody that picks this benefit is going to live for, eons and eons and get checks every month. I can tell you there's a pretty high probability that you're going to get out of the plan what you put into it, but that's not always the case. The scenario that we just told you about, it's definitely not the case. And if that's something that's going to keep you up at night, really give you some pains, then you might want to consider the next option that we're going to talk about, and that's the modified cash refund option. And how this one works is essentially it's going to guarantee that you're going to get out of the plan at least what you put into it. Okay? So when you establish your effective date, so you're putting in your application, you have an account balance. We tell you most of the time not to bother about the account balance because it doesn't really matter. It's not factored really into that formula, but it's a little bit, and it's only for this option. We look at your original account balance when you establish your effective date, and then we're going to minus or subtract out the monthly benefit payments that you've received at the point that you pass away. And then whatever's left from that is going to be paid to your beneficiary designated on file. So let's think about a numbers example for this one. Numbers really help me to understand a little bit better. Let's say that you start with $60,000. Okay, $60,000 is your account balance, so that's your account balance plus interest. And then you receive $10,000 worth of benefit payments. Well, if you passed away at that point in time, what we're going to pay to your beneficiary would be, yell it at the screen, it's $50,000. Great, because it's your initial balance, our $60,000, minus the $10,000 payment that we received, equals what's paid to your beneficiary designated on file. Okay, so you're guaranteed to at least get what you put into it. All right. The next option that we're going to talk about is the period certain and continuous option. And this one's, it's a little confusing because it's associated with some numbers. And with this one, it's associated with 5, 10, or 15 years as an option. But I don't want you to think about it in terms of years. I want you to think about it in terms of monthly payments. So how many monthly payments are there in 5 years? 60. There are 60 monthly payments in 5 years. So that means there's 120 monthly payments in 10 years and 180 monthly payments in 15 years. Okay? The way this one works, we're going to take that payment period and we're going to say that perhaps you pass away during your payment period that you picked. If that happens, then the remainder of those monthly payments is going to be paid to whoever you have designated on file as your beneficiaries. Let's look at an example of this one. If I've got a 5-year period certain and continuous, and so 60 monthly payments, and I receive 48 monthly payments and then pass away, how many payments would be paid to my beneficiary designated on file? You're right, 12. 12 monthly payments, or the remaining payments in that 60 monthly payment period would go to my beneficiary designated on file. And kind of how that would work is, let's say I'm getting $1,000 a month, and I have for my 48 months, and then I pass away. Well, if I have 3 beneficiaries designated on file, then that payment, let's say it was $900, just for the sake of being easy, is split 3 ways with my three beneficiaries. So they'd receive $300 a month for the final 12 months apiece. Okay, so it's your benefit split between your beneficiaries, paid for the rest of that payment period. Okay, now let's look at some scenarios that can happen both with modified cash and period certain. With modified cash, when we talked about that one, we started with a $60,000 balance. We minused about $10,000 in payments, so our beneficiaries got $50,000. But this can happen sometimes. Let's say that we have a $60,000 balance, and then we receive something like $80,000 in payments. Would there be any payout to our beneficiary under that? No, because we've overcome that initial amount. That's how modified cash works. With periods certain and continuous, though, this can happen as well. Let's say we've got a 5-year payment period, so 60 monthly payments, and then we receive 110 monthly payments and pass away. There would be no payments in our initial payment period left to pay a beneficiary because we're outside of that payment period. So that's how those two work. But modified cash and period certain also kind of offer you something else, and that is beneficiary flexibility. Now, beneficiary flexibility is going to be very, very important to some people, and to other people, it's not going to matter at all. But what it is the ability to change your beneficiaries on file after you've begun to receive benefit payments. So you established your effective date, you've begun to receive payments under whatever option you chose, and you have that terrible Thanksgiving. You know that Thanksgiving that I'm talking about. That Thanksgiving that makes you want to fill out a new beneficiary form. Um, if that should happen, you can totally do that. But you have to have beneficiary flexibility in order to make changes to your beneficiaries after you've established your effective date. Okay, so you can change your beneficiaries after you started making payments. Beneficiary flexibility also offers you the ability to add multiple beneficiaries. Let's say you'd like to have your 3 grandkids or your 5 nieces and nephews or 10 other people. You have to have an option that'll allow you to do that. Modified cash and period certain and continuous offer you beneficiary flexibility, so you can do that with those two. So multiple beneficiaries, and you can change them after you started receiving payments. Another thing you can do with these two options is you can add a beneficiary who is an entity. Like, let's say you'd like to have payments go to a church or a charity, a trust. You can add an entity as a beneficiary if you have modified cash or period certain and continuous as your option. Okay, but those two offer you that beneficiary flexibility if you need to have that. Remember, with life only, we don't even get to add a beneficiary when we pick that option because there is no beneficiary payout under that option. So the reason that I talk about these two that way, modified cash and period certain, is because the next two after this that we're going to discuss, they lock you in to one beneficiary. So they do not offer you beneficiary flexibility. Okay. The one we're going to discuss now is joint survivor. With joint survivor, who do you think would be that beneficiary that you're locked in with? Well, it's your spouse. And more importantly, it's the spouse that you're married to at the time that you establish your effective date. I'm going to say it again because it's important. With joint survivor, if you pick that option, you are locked in to one beneficiary, and it is the spouse you are married to at the time you establish your effective date. So let's say your spouse predeceases you. You pick the joint survivor option, and then they predecease you. They die before you. Should that occur, then what's going to happen is you'll still receive payments for the rest of your life, but there is no beneficiary then associated with that because your beneficiary has passed away. With this one, there are some numbers associated with it as well, 50, 75%, and 100%. That is simply the percentage that's going to be paid to your spouse should you pass away. Okay. So let's say, for example's sake, I have a 75% joint and survivor. I am receiving a benefit that is $1,000 a month. And then I pass away. My spouse is going to receive 75% of that, so $750 a month for the rest of his lifetime. Okay? So that's how this one functions. With that said, you can pick the percentage, 50, 75%, and 100%. I did have someone who questioned us one time at a seminar that was like, well, why would you take a 50% J&S? Well, there's a lot of good different financial situations, as many as there are people on the call. One of the things you might have to look at is that, when your spouse passes away, you might not also have the expense of that spouse. So you might not have that second car, that second full tank of gas, that second, amount of prescriptions that you're paying for. So maybe it would make sense if the benefit went down to that for your spouse, because they also don't have the expense of that spouse. And I think that's kind of the thinking behind that. So interesting. But like I said, every single one of these, all of these options, one of them will fit your lifestyle. One of them is going to fit your retirement goals. You just have to assess what those are. The joint or non-spousal joint survivor, the next one we're going to talk about, that one locks you in with one beneficiary that you pick at the time that you establish your effective date, but it can be anyone. It can be any one living human being. That's it. I will tell you with joint survivor and non-spousal joint survivor, something that you have to consider though, these beneficiaries that you're locked in with at the beginning when you establish your effective date, we take into consideration the age of that person, because we have to, when we figure out the monthly amount, look at the people's mortality tables, look at your mortality tables, look at a bunch of different factors that are going to go into what your monthly amount's going to be. So if we're actually adding the probability of a death benefit payout for that beneficiary's lifetime, then we have to factor in their age. I had a really nice lady who came up to me after a seminar one time and says, Heather, I think I'm going to take that non-spousal joint survivor option. And I said, oh, great. Did you pick your one living human being? And she said, oh, yeah. I think it's going to be my granddaughter. She just turned 19. Now, I want you to think real hard about what adding the probability that we're going to make a lifetime monthly benefit payout to a 19-year-old is going to do to grandma's monthly benefit. It's going to bring it way, way down. So it's just something to consider when you're picking an option on here, that is a factor. And I really do encourage you to use those benefit estimators that we give you, because you can't do retirement planning if you don't have hard numbers in front of you. Okay, there's no way that you can think about goals, make financial goals without knowing the kind of income or income stream that you might need to establish. I did say earlier I am not a financial planner, but I will give you some free financial planning advice. And so, it's worth what you paid for it. With this day and age, the financial planners are looking to set people up most of the time with an 80 to 85% salary income replacement. And what that is just simply what you're making now. They would like to have you have 80% of that coming from different places to replace in retirement. Okay. And that's not too off. We're going to get a little bit more into that. But establishing an income stream here using one of these benefit options is going to be important. So you need to go in and really consider what your goals are and how to accomplish that with this plan. Now, we wanted to give you some, like I said, numbers examples really help me. So when we worked this presentation up, we had a look at our benefit estimator and we ran some numbers so you can see those. With these sample benefits, we used a tier 1 member and we based them on an average final salary of about $35,000. So let's just take a look at them real quick. In that first column, it says normal. What we mean by that, normal retirement age in your plan is age 65, isn't it? And so we gave this person also 20 years of service credit. You can see the life only, and this is something I didn't mention, but I will. With that zero probability of a death benefit payout, life only is almost always the highest monthly paying option. But you can see it's not too far off from the other ones. But because of that no payout after you pass away, it does tend to be the highest monthly paying option, just in case you're interested in that one. With the modified cash, that's the one where your account balance matters. We take that into consideration because the benefit that's paid to your beneficiary under this one is what? It is your initial account balance minus the payments that you receive equals the payout to your beneficiary. Okay, and you can see that monthly amount that we would pay for that. With the period certain and continuous, you can also see with that increased probability of a death benefit payout. So the longer period of time, 15 years is the longer period of time, right? If you're a beneficiary, that's the one that you want your person to have, because that's there. With that longer period of time, then there's a higher probability of a death benefit payout. And you can see that reflected in the monthly amount being less than if, let's say, you had a 5-year option. Okay. And joint survivor, it's the reason that they're different monthly. Here, it's because of the percentage that would be paid out to your spouse upon your passing. So if we're only going to pay out 50% of your monthly benefit to your spouse, yeah, that one's a little bit more for you per month. As opposed to if we were going to pay 100% of your benefit to your spouse after you pass away for their lifetime. Now, with the non-spousal joint survivor annuity down here, that's way different than the other ones, isn't it? When we ran this, we did a beneficiary for that option that is 20 years younger than us. And you can see that reflected in the monthly amount. The spousal option, the joint survivor one that we looked at, we made the spouse on that the same age that we are. And that makes a difference. Like I said, the age is a factor when you lock in with that specific beneficiary option. Okay. So there's our normal options, column 1. In column 2, it says reduced. That's somebody who is age 60, who took their benefit at age 60. And then, of course, 20 years of service. So essentially, column 1, column 2, it's just difference in age. When did you take your benefit? Column 1, it's normal retirement age. Column 2, what you're seeing there is the brunt of the full reduction. So that's a full 15% reduction. Now, I'm going to say once again something that Jeremy said earlier. It's about when. It's about when you take your money, when you establish your effective date. If this person were to quit at age 60, like just, quit employment or terminate employment, essentially, and wait, every single year that they wait, that they're closer to 65, that's an increase of 3% per month, basically, in that monthly amount in the second column. So if they waited to take their benefit until they were age 65, then column 1 and column 2 are going to look exactly the same. Because remember, once you hit that age 65, that's an unreduced benefit. So there you go. The last column there is somebody who meets rule of 85. Okay, with the rule of 85, wait, the numbers on that are pretty big, aren't they? That's a big difference in the monthly amount. Is it because this person met the rule of 85 that their benefit's been increased that much? Well, yes and no. No, really, because rule of 85 only gives you access to an unreduced benefit. The big difference in this column than the other columns is that 10 years of extra service credit that we're looking at. And service credit matters. That 10 years of extra service credit is what affects this benefit the most. You can see reflected in those monthly amounts how much more it is per month. and that's based on that service credit. So yes, rule of 85 is going to give you access to an unreduced benefit. But in this column, in this example that we're looking at, if we took those 10 years of service, this one's got 30 years of service on it. So if we took those 10 years of extra service and moved them to the first column, essentially those amounts would be the same. So that's what we're talking about. Rule of 85 only really gives you access to an unreduced benefit a little earlier. Choosing an option. This one's kind of a big one, but it's something that we need to address. And that is, everybody comes here with something different. Okay? Making our choices in retirement, that's a lot of different factors that we need to look at. We need to take into consideration things that you probably, maybe you haven't even thought about. Like, what's your health history? What's your family's health history? We looked at that unreduced and reduced benefits, but there may be a good reason for you to take a reduced benefit. If your health is poor, if you have chronic conditions, there's nothing wrong with starting your benefit at 62, taking Social Security early at 62. Yeah, there's reductions on that, but who knows? Maybe you'd be receiving payments for longer. Smaller payments for a longer period of time is still, at the end, the same. So you might want to consider that. Do you have poor health? Is it stressing you out to keep continuing to work and do this job? There's a lot of different factors. How's your debt to income ratio? Do you have a lot of things that may need to be paid off before you consider retirement? When we look at things like this, what I really want you to do is I want you to go to that old rusty file cabinet or that old dog-eared accordion folder that you've got where you keep all the important paperwork. And we know exactly what paperwork that we're talking about here. Do you have life insurance? Do you know who your beneficiaries are on your life insurance? Have you properly titled and gotten life insurance on other stuff? Insurance on other things? There's a lot of different things we have to sit down and really take a microscope to or a magnifying glass and kind of be like, okay, so this is where I am with this thing. This is where I am with this thing. Some of us are going to need to sit down with actual financial planners. And most financial planners that I know of, they're worth every single penny that you pay for them. And they can assess or look at the big financial picture that you have. And a lot of us have a lot of different things that we're going to need to look at before we take that benefit. I'm going to tell you a great story I think it's a great story. With the period certain and continuous, the 15-year, I knew an individual who retired in 1986. Okay. When they retired, they picked the 15-year period certain and continuous option. And they did that for a very specific reason. When they looked at their financial picture, they looked at everything and said, okay, my financial goal with this pension plan is to make sure that my mortgage is paid off. They had, at that point in time, 15 years left to pay on the house. And they wanted to make sure that if they passed away during that point in time, the house would be paid off at least. That was important to them. So I'm going to tell you, this person, they worked for 43 years, and they were a SPED teacher, and they put in $28,000 total to the plan over that 43 years a period. This person received about $650,000 in benefit payments because she lived to be 95 years old. The reason that I get to tell you about this is because she's my grandma. And she has since passed away, but she received quite a bit more than she ever put into this plan. And it sounds silly when I tell you that, like, oh, look how much she got out of it. But this is not the anomaly. Her story is not the anomaly. It's more like the rule. okay? Not the exception to the rule, the rule, at least in what we see statistically most of the time. But $650,000 more than what she put in. And she lived to be 95, and she was still getting payments at that point in time. Now, she was way, way outside of her 15 years, because remember, she picked the 15-year period certain and continuous. She paid that house off herself and then lived a good, 18 years past that point in time where we were going to pay a beneficiary. But she continued to receive that payment. And you have to really keep that in mind. When I started talking about the options, I said the most important thing, which is no matter which option you pick, that is going to pay you, the member, a benefit for the rest of your life, no matter how old you get. And one of the big problems that we see with retirement right now is the fact that people outlive their funds. If you don't have a retirement set up properly that's going to pay you for your life, then there is the possibility you could outlive your funds in retirement. And you don't want to have to be trying to find a job when you're 90. It's difficult. So this is one of the great things about this plan. You pick an effective option. Not only is it going to take care of your retirement goals, like making sure the house is paid off no matter what, but it's also going to take care of you. And that's the most important thing to us. So very important to know, when making these decisions, you really have to consider a lot of different things. Your retirement goals, what kind of lifestyle you're going to lead in retirement. People who tend to travel or think they're going to go, maybe snowbird, which is great. You're going to need a certain amount of money for that. You have to plan for that. When we talk about this, I have somebody in a seminar recently who stopped and said, Heather, you don't ever discuss refunding this account. Well, there's a reason for that. With a defined benefit plan, really the benefit is getting that monthly payment for the rest of your life. That's the big deal. And like I said, we do, most people will get out of the plan in payments way, way more than they think. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we talk about reemployment. But it's important to note that should you want to refund out this, or take a distribution of this account or roll it over someplace, if you take a distribution, there's taxation at 20 and 5. So literally a quarter of that's going to go to the government. You might get it back at the end of the year, depending on how you did your taxes or not. But it's something that kind of my predecessor would always say is not a good financial move. As a fiduciary, I don't, encourage it, but I am going to say it's an option if you want it. Sometimes we have bad situations crop up. Maybe we've acquired a terminal illness or something like that, and a lump sum of money is the way that we have to go. That is an option if you need it. Okay, but that's all that I say. And if you do take a distribution, then you don't get the employer match. Okay, it's just your contributions and interest. But I did address that a little bit so that you know it's an option if you need it. When we talk about the financial planning aspects of this, we want to make sure that you know you're not alone. When I talked earlier about the trend for financial planning and the fact that they want to replace about 80 to 85% of your salary income in retirement, we're part of that. The pension plan is part of that. The other part of it is, let's say, Social Security. If you're lucky enough to qualify for Social Security benefit at this point in time, I hope you know those numbers. Do you? Have you thought about that one? Social Security has basically an estimator on their website that you can access. You don't even have to create one of those My Social Security accounts. You can do it just on the non-secure side, and it's going to ask you some questions, and they're going to seem a little bit more specific than they normally would, but that's because Social Security, remember, they do their benefit based on your 35 highest years of salaries that's been reported. So in order to access that, your personal information, they do need a couple things to find that. But you can get a fairly viable, accurate estimate from their website. That is ssa.gov. So ssa.gov, and go to the estimator there. Get your numbers for Social Security, what Social Security is going to pay you every month. We want to be a part of that as well. So we have this estimated table. It's kind of a guesstimate about how much this plan will replace for you in retirement. Okay. Now, with this, we took the 2% static multiplier. That number is part of the formula. We talked about the formula factor, and we talked about the option factor. The option factor is what goes along with whatever option you've picked. And we just talked about the options in depth, didn't we? So this is that formula factor, and that formula factor stays the same. It's 2%. So with that in mind, we took that and kind of put it into a guesstimate. If you know what your service credit years are, take those times that 2% multiplier. It's going to give you a bit of an idea of how much this plan will replace for you in retirement. So let's say that I have 20 years of service credit. If that's true, and I can look at this chart, hey, this plan is probably going to replace about 40% of my income. Now let's think about Social Security. Jeremy said earlier that that's supposed to replace about 35 to 40% of your income. So let's go the high end and say it's another 40%. Well, that puts us at 80%. That's not bad, right? As far as financial planning goes, and what we've been seeing as trends and what financial planners try and get us to with income replacement, we're sitting at 80%. That's not bad. Now, there's a couple people on the other side of this screen right now who are looking at this chart and coming up with service credit, and maybe they're not as comfortable as 80%. That's okay. We're not done yet. If you need a place to maybe save some of that panic cash right now for retirement, there's a good place. The school systems, most schools in Nebraska, all have something called a 403B. Now, a 403B is a pre-tax retirement savings account that you can access and put funds into to work in conjunction with this plan. Now, it's not something we administer. So if you were to call NPERS and say, hey, I have questions about my 403B, nobody'd be able to answer them for you. We don't administer a 403B plan. This is done by your school system. So if you have questions about it, go into your HR or payroll, talk to them. The reason that I mention it during these webinars is because it's an option for you. And some people may know all about it. Some people know nothing about it. And this 403B, the reason that I mention it during these programs is because it has a higher contribution limit. If you're getting closer to retirement and you're looking for a way to, a safe place to put some pre-tax retirement savings, you're getting to that retirement finish line, this is a great place because of those higher contribution limits it has. This year, I believe it's something like $20,500 that you could put in if you're under 50. And if you're over 50, it's between like $26,000 and $27,000, depending on what you qualify for. If you're interested in contributing to a 403B, you need to talk to your HR. You need to see who administers that plan on behalf of your school, okay? But super easy to get involved with. And let's say you're having a big payout of maybe unused sick leave or vacation leave, and you need a place to put that pre-tax because you know that if they pay out a large balance of stuff like that to you, it's going to hit your income and drive you into the next tax bracket. And what's going to happen then? Well, we're going to lose more of that to taxes. But if you put it into a pre-tax retirement account, you may wait a bit to see it, but it's there and more of it's there in your pocket. And that's the kind of tax strategizing that we need to be aware of, that we need to be thinking on. How am I going to get the most out of this money and make sure it stays in my pocket as much as possible? So there you go. Take a look at a 403B if you need a good place to put stuff. Retirement inducements and incentives. We know a lot of schools are paying out early retirement inducements and incentives. If that's the case, then perhaps a 403B would be a good place to put that type of money, rather than having it, counted as your income and possibly losing more of that to taxes. Okay, so there you go. That's what I have to say about that. Moving on. Big scary slide. This one says suspension of benefits. With the suspension of benefits that we're talking about here, if we have two pieces of mail that are returned as undeliverable or just returned to our office for some reason, we're going to stop your benefit payments. The reason for that one, pretty simple. It's much easier to start your benefit payments up again than it is to try and get money back from someone who is deceased. So please keep your address up to date with us. Just because you're retired and your benefit is going directly into your account via direct deposit, that doesn't mean that your bank will tell us if you've moved or not. They don't. So make sure that you just let us know. We're not one of those offices that's going to constantly bother you and call you up and, middle of the weekend, hey, we just called to chat. That's not us. But we do want to tell you about the increase in your COLA in July. And we do want to send you a newsletter maybe at the end of the year so you know how to assess your tax information and some other things happening with legislation. We do want to make sure that we can get you your 1099-R because you'll need that to file your taxes. So please just keep your address current with us. If you move out of state or something like that, just write down your new address and sign that on a piece of paper and send it in. We don't need anything complicated, but we do need to know. The next thing that we're going to talk about here is reemployment. And reemployments used to be a very difficult discussion. But we had some really great things happen in the field of reemployment regulations within the last year. So this discussion gets to be very exciting. We had legislation LB 147 that passed that gave us better rules as far as what is acceptable during reemployment, meaning, well, let's start it simply. What did Jeremy tell you had to do in order to take your benefit under this plan? He said you have to stop working. The IRS says you have to stop working. You must terminate employment. And they get real specific about it. They have a definition of what terminate employment means to them. Because they're the IRS and they love rules. So you have to terminate employment. And because we're all in the same plan, right? Teachers, administrators, janitors, bus drivers, lunch ladies, everybody, all in the same plan, the same retirement plan. And moreover, every Nebraska school in the same retirement plan, except which one? Except OPS. Parochial schools also don't count. They're not in the plan. But we're all in the same plan. So essentially, let's say you terminated employment at whatever school A that you were working at, and then suddenly next month you go to work for school B. School A and school B participate in the same retirement plan. So if you're trying to take your benefit, the IRS looks at that and goes, they never stopped working. You didn't meet the definition of terminated employment. Okay, so this is what we're looking at here. This is the issue. And it's for, Nebraska schools that participate in the retirement plan specifically. We don't care if you terminate your employment at the school and then go to something that is private employment. Like, let's say you always wanted to be a barista at Starbucks, so you go work for Starbucks. That's perfectly okay. We're more concerned about you coming back to something that's in the plan. Okay, so they actually have a great definition for this one, and they say you can't provide any services during a minimum of 180-day calendar break. And that starts on the date of your termination. So remember, what's your termination date? Well, it's the last day that you can be required to render services under your contract. And we say it that way for a reason. But essentially, if you're non-contracted, if you don't have a contract, sometimes it's your last day of school. Sometimes for contracted individuals, it's your last physical day at school. Now, I don't know that because I don't see your contracts. But I'm going to tell you, there have been some very surprised individuals who have gone to retire, did not read their contract, and then got required to come back to like a meeting during the summer or something like that at their school, and then got paid for that, and then had their effective date moved 2 months from when they thought it was going to be. So it's just very important to know when you can be required to render service. Okay. All right. So during that 180 days, you're not allowed to provide paid voluntary service, part-time service, temporary service, seasonal service. The list goes on. Just don't provide service. But in Nebraska, as I'm sure most of you watching know, has an exception to this. The exception is that we have a substitute and volunteer exception in there. And this is what actually got clarified with LB 147. So we were super excited about this because before this, we asked the IRS, hey, how many times is okay for people to do this subbing? And they would go, it just can't be regular. It's got to be sporadic, intermittent. It's very vague. What do you do with a vague answer? So now we've got rules. They said you can provide service during the 180 days on an intermittent basis. And what that means is no more than 8 days of service in a calendar month. Well, that's not bad. Well, a day of service, though, a day of service is any length of time. So let's say you have to run in for 5 minutes during the summer and answer the phone in the office. That counts. That's one. Or you provide a whole day of substitute service, 8 hours of substitute service. That's still one. That happened one day. Okay. So we've got this great definition now. And remember, this is 8 days of service per calendar month of the 180 days. This is not 8 days of service during the 180 days. This is per month of that 180 days. Every calendar month, you can provide that 8 days of service. That's really generous and really wonderful. And I think it really, at least to me, kind of showed that the legislature cares about the problem that we have getting substitutes and keeping substitutes and volunteers in our school. It's great. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the guidance because honestly, I mean, before this, the rules were so vague. So let's set out some things that we can't do under this. You can't combine your 8 subbing days and 8 volunteering days. Okay? That's a total of 16 days. You can't do 8 substitute days at one school, school A, and during the same month, do 8 days of subbing at school B. That's 16 days. Okay? You can't agree to train your replacement. This is a big one for our administrators mostly and things like that who want to stay around and teach other people, payroll or, office staffing, the filing, what we need to do, the computer system. But I'm afraid that's not allowed. You can't use these 8 days to train your replacement. And you can't train your replacement because essentially what you're doing is called a prearranged return to service. And we're going to get into that a little bit more in a minute. You can't do refereeing, officiating, or coaching because those are all considered regular employment. Okay, so there we go. This is what LB 147 looks like. We actually made a really great FAQ, so frequently asked questions document that we have up on our website currently that goes through some scenarios that are associated with this one, things that are okay and things that are not okay, and things we were hearing right when this legislation came out. We want to be as clear as possible about this because it's a great thing. And just to be upfront with you, if we have issues with this, if people can't keep it to the 8 days that we need them to keep it to, we'll lose it. So this is something we'd like to keep. It's a really great ability to be able to do this. So there we go. Let's talk a little bit about prearranged returns to service. With a prearranged return to service, what that is, and I'm going to give you an example of how this one normally shows up. You ready? Normally, it goes like this. You know what? I think I'm going to retire. I think I'm going to retire and take my benefit. But don't worry, I'll be back to coach track in the spring. You can't do that. What you're essentially trying to do is circumvent the 180 days. And the IRS sees that. We see that. You can't do that. This is any verbal or written agreement to return to service, essentially, to circumvent the 180 days to come back. And when this happens, the problem is that it constitutes you not actually leaving because you had no intention of quitting. That's the thing. The IRS looks at it and goes, oh, you had no intention of quitting. So that's why prearrangements are so dangerous. Now, we used to have an inducement form that people had to fill out where they indicated if they had a prearranged return to service or not. This was basically a form that told you had to turn your own self in. With this one, the reason that we have so many problems with this and that it's a big problem for everybody in the plan is the fact that, you know, if you have a prearranged return to service or if you violate, meaning you provide 9, 10, 11 days during a calendar month of 180 days, there are consequences to this. And normally it's, you know, when we're at the seminars or something, people will turn to each other and go, you know what, Susan got away with that. And I don't know why they make such a big deal about it. Well, we're aware people have gotten away with this. But let me tell you, as a financial agency for the state of Nebraska, we are audited literally constantly. We have APA auditors, we have internal auditors. We are audited. And audited, it's not a bad thing. Auditing helps you improve. It helps you be transparent, and it helps you be good with other people's money, essentially. So I like a good audit. But I'm going to tell you, most of the problems are found during audits. So do you remember how I told you that a lot of the time people can receive in benefit payments far more than they put in, right? Well, this is where that becomes a problem, because if we find during an audit that you violated this, then what happens is all of your benefit payments come due back to us immediately. And it's plus interest, and it becomes an IRS tax debt. So there is no bankrupting your way out of that. That's why this is important. We had 6 investigations on this last year, and all of the investigations were not for small money. They were for, the lowest one was $250,000, all the way up to the highest one that I heard of was $760,000. This will financially ruin someone in retirement. As a fiduciary, it's bone chilling is what it is. Don't do this. Plain and simple, don't do this. If you think that you might go over those 8 days that you've been allotted per calendar month of the 180 days, don't retire. Don't take your funds out or sit out the 180 days. Make sure that you definitely have the intention to do that. Go golf. Retirement's supposed to be for you, a new chapter of you doing new things. So we want you to enjoy it. We really do. But reemployment's kind of a touchy subject because when one person is out of compliance in the plan, that brings the whole plan out of compliance. We could lose our tax qualified status as a plan. So it's not just your retirement that would be put in jeopardy by this. It is literally every teacher, lunch lady, bus driver, recess monitor, everybody. So don't, okay? I'm also going to tell you, and this is just comes from being out in the wild, wild west of the state and having people talk to me about this pretty much constantly. Those employers that are begging for you to stay, they are not going to be there when you're asked to pay back all your benefits. Okay? Don't violate reemployment regulations. Now, let's say that you've been fishing for a year and suddenly the entire pond is dry and you're like, you know what? I miss the kids. I think I want to go back. You can absolutely do that. It's been a year. You're going to come into the plan again as a new member, a Tier 4 member, and we're going to continue to pay you benefits just like we have been. So you can do that. There's this period of time. Don't. We need to establish that you terminated and you terminated in good faith. Okay? So there you go. That's reemployment. Now, if you have questions about this, we want you to call. Everybody's situation is totally different, but we'd much rather have a conversation about this right now than have that conversation that we're going to have with you later. Okay? We're going to move on to the only thing that's more fun than reemployment, and that's death. We're going to talk about death before retirement. So, what period of time are we talking about now? Well, we're talking about what happens at lunch today. What if lunch is terrible? Death now. So you haven't filled out your application for retirement. You haven't terminated service yet. You haven't met your age and vesting requirements. Now, we're talking about now. If your spouse is your sole primary beneficiary, meaning your only listed beneficiary, your only listed primary beneficiary, then they have access to something called the Enhanced Spousal Benefit. And what that means is if you, the member, have 20 years of service or you're age 65, your spouse is then eligible to take an annuity. They can take an annuity payment upon your death. You got 5 to 20 years of service, they can take an annuity payment. Remember, that is a lifetime monthly benefit that could be provided under this plan for them. Or they can take a refund of the account plus 101% of that account value. So that value on your statement that you see, think of that again and then add about $3. It's 101%. Okay? So in order for that to happen, they have to be listed as your sole primary beneficiary, meaning that on that primary beneficiary box, they can be the only person that's listed. It has to say so-and-so, spouse, 100%. Because if they're not listed like that, let's say that you have your spouse on there and you have one child, and both of them are listed as your primary. Doesn't even matter what percentage of who's getting what there. If you have two beneficiaries listed, then your spouse does not have access to these enhanced spousal benefits. And this is important. I mean, that's an annuity for the rest of their life. So if you want that, if you want your spouse to have access to that, know who your beneficiaries are. Are you aware of who your beneficiaries are? Unfortunately, with the school plan, one of the things that is kind of prevalent, you're ready, is that we have people who gain employment with the school and they fill out a beneficiary form at that point in time, which is great. But then they teach for 30 years. and don't update their beneficiaries at all, ever. They simply say, oh, I've already filled that out. Not a problem. Now, if you don't have your spouse listed as your sole primary beneficiary, the benefits kind of pale. If you have a non-spousal beneficiary or you're less than 5 years in of service credit, then they're only entitled to a lump sum payment, lump sum, your contributions plus interest. That's it. So if you want them to have access to this, you really need to know who your beneficiaries are and have them listed correctly in order to access these enhanced spousal benefits, okay? So how do we know who our beneficiaries are? Like I said, we have a lot of people who do that 30 years of teaching with one beneficiary form on file, and it can lead to some problems. I've processed death payments, so I have seen these problems firsthand. You're going to tell me, Heather, nobody does this. Well, at least one person a year does this, where they just haven't updated their beneficiary form on this plan in so long because one reason or another. And so then we go to pay out the account and we pull up their beneficiary form on file, and it is from 30 years ago, and it lists their parents, their mom and dad, who have long been deceased, as their primaries, and then maybe a contingent, and that contingent was their fiance at the time, who is now their ex. And I'm going to tell you, that person may be a real nice person, and they may get paid and give that money directly to the family who needs it. But they don't have to. You can't make them. So please know who you have listed and make sure they're listed correctly. You heard what you can do simply by listing as your spouse as your sole primary beneficiary and how many benefits they have access to under that. We can't tell you over the phone who your beneficiaries are. That's not something we do. But you can see them if you have an NPERS account, an NPERS online account, which you can access from our website, which is what? npers.ne.gov. That's our website. And it's about the 50th time I've said it, I think. But you can review them if you have an NPERS online account. If you need to fill out a new beneficiary form, you'll notice that our beneficiary forms, which you can also get on our website, they're notarized. They ask for a notary. And you may look at that and go, oh, that's just the most inconvenient thing ever. But I'm going to share a little secret with you. The biggest payments, the largest, biggest payments that leave this office are death benefit payments or just death payments. They're huge. So we want to make sure that the people that are, changing beneficiaries on file here, not trying to commit fraud, which can happen, does happen. We want to make sure it's you. That's the reason for that notary. Okay. I'm also going to give you a little processing tip here. When we get these, they are notarized. Make sure that when you're signing in front of a notary that you have to put down a date when you sign. But the notary also has to put down, hey, I saw this person sign on this date. If those two dates don't match, it invalidates the entire form. And you're like, Heather, how important could this be? Well, it invalidates approximately 1/3 of all the beneficiary forms that we receive. So please, when you're signing in front of a notary, just take a look at that date there. Just make sure that your date and their date match. It saves everybody a lot of a headache. After all, you went to the trouble of finding a notary. So, I mean, of course, we don't want to have to find a notary again. There's always a good time to update your beneficiaries. Actually, this is a personal thing. I don't tell anybody to do something that I wouldn't do. I sit down about once a year and have a look through who I have listed. I make sure some accounts that I know would be more beneficial go to certain beneficiaries, and other beneficiaries are listed on other accounts. But if it has a place where I can list a beneficiary on it, it has a beneficiary. we should all really be aware of the fact that there are a lot of different accounts in our lives. Some of them seem real small or real big, but make sure that you have those beneficiary listings on them. Take a minute to just take a look. You'd be so surprised. I think we hear from the estate planner, and this is just a little tip from seminars that we know. You can put beneficiaries on things like, of course, your checking accounts and your pension plans and your life insurance, but you can also put beneficiaries on things like car titles if you want. You can put beneficiary designations via something called a TOD deed on your real estate now. At least that has been for the last 10 years. And to do that, you need to contact like an estate planning attorney. But that puts a beneficiary on your property. That's huge. Because all planning that we do, all estate planning and planning for our death, all we're doing is making things easier for the people that we love. Because I've processed death payments. I've heard people crying on the phone because they need money for a funeral. And a little bit of pre-planning on this goes a huge long way in comforting the people that are left behind. So set this up now. It's important. Okay? When you're filling out a beneficiary designation form, you can put down an estate if you like. If you do that, please put on a PR or personal representative. That's what a new executor is called. If you're going to do a trust, please put down the name of a trustee for that trust so that we can contact them if you're going to list them on a beneficiary form. Now, if you have a testamentary trust, which is more like a springing trust that comes when you pass away, comes from your will, just give us the name of an attorney, somebody we can contact. Just important that we can get a hold of somebody to pay out that account, okay? This is what our beneficiary designation form actually looks like. If you look up here in the corner, and I think that's just the right corner up here where it says plan type, these are the 6 plans that we currently administer here in the office. If you're a member of more than one plan, and we do actually have a lot of people that are members in more than one plan, and you want to have your beneficiary apply to all of your accounts. All you got to do is put down your beneficiaries and then check the box for each plan that applies to you. Now, I myself am a member in 2 plans. I'm a member in the state plan and I'm a member in the DCP plan. So if I wanted my beneficiaries that I have on here to apply to both of those, I just check those 2 boxes. It's very convenient. Let's look down here at the beneficiaries as primary beneficiaries. Right there, we've got 5 lines to put our 5 beneficiaries if you'd like. You can see it says name, their relationship, social security number, date of birth, but at the end there is something important. That is the percentage. We want you to really take a look at that percentage. If you've got 2, then, it doesn't have to be 50-50. If you don't want it to be, it can be 90-10. Just make sure it's not 90-20. That you need to total up to 100% of your account. That is an important thing there. Just so that when we pay it out, we can pay out 100% of your account. Now, I said before there's 5 lines. What happens if you got six kids? You're going to have to pull one aside, say, sorry, Jenny, I'm afraid you just didn't make the cut this year. No, we've got you covered. This is the back of the form. It's called the supplemental form. So you can see here there's quite a few different spots. Just remember that if you've got primaries on the front of this form and you choose to add primaries on the back of this form, everybody who's a primary still has to total 100%. Okay? And at the margin there, you see that 0.00. If you fill out the fillable form and save that, honestly, there's a spot that'll keep track of the 100%, how much to 100% you need to do. So there you go. The last thing that we're going to talk about today, and this is going to be absolutely brief. The reason it's brief is because NPERS does not administer any kind of health insurance. Okay? We just don't. But you're at a webinar today because we're here to offer you options. We're here to set up ideas and let you kind of do some planning. One of the things that you are going to have to plan for is health insurance. That's just straight up. Because nobody that I know has ever gotten healthier as they've gotten older. If you know them, that's great. But we have to have health insurance in this day and age. So coverage is important. And if you're not covered by an employer plan, then you need to be covered by something else. So between the ages of 50 and 65, the people in the school plan do have kind of an option that's offered to them that's not exactly available to other, plans that I talk to. And that is an EHA plan. That's the Educators Health Alliance Blue Cross Blue Shield direct bill plan for early retirees. That's a mouthful, isn't it? With this one, you're going to pay the full premiums plus the fees, but you have access to that. You do have to meet some eligibility requirements for this one. So make sure that you understand that. If you go to the website that we've listed on the slide there, ehaplan.org/retiree-info, then that's going to get you to a page that's got a bunch of videos on it. Not the first video, you ready? Not the first video that's on there. But if you go a little bit further down, the one that says early retirees is the one you want to watch. And it's about 27 minutes long. And it gives you kind of an overview of this coverage and what it'll do for you. And I believe there's some eligibility requirements that you have to meet in order to access that. But it is an option for you. And it's available through a EHA. Okay. The next one that we have on here is it says Affordable Care Act, and there's a question mark behind it. Honestly, it's been about 10 years, that question mark's still there on the slide. But I don't do a lot of talking about this plan for a very good reason. At this point in time, it's so politicized that I can't assure retirees that it's going to be around forever. Okay? I can't. With that said, do I know current retirees who have gone to the state exchanges page and picked up zero premium health insurance that they absolutely love? Yeah, I do. I know quite a few of them actually. But like I said, I don't want to suggest something to someone, have them pick this as their healthcare option, and then, 2 years in, suddenly it's gone. It's not an option for anybody. And you're 58 without health insurance. I'd feel bad about that. So if you're interested, please take a look at these. They have a free, site that you can look at and actually, I think, put in your income and a couple other things, and it'll show you what's available as far as coverage under the Affordable Care Act. Okay. The next thing I'm going to talk about briefly is Medicare. This is somebody who's, getting up close to 65 or is 65 now. With Medicare, we know that traversing that can be a real pain. It's very complicated and it's very complex, but we have a really great organization that we partner with to do these presentations, and it's called SHIP, and that is the Senior Health Insurance Information Program, or I think it's State Health Insurance Assistance Program. Now, whatever it is, acronym is SHIP, and they have a great website and great individuals who will help people navigate Medicare. We have a video for this on our website that you can watch. It's about an hour long, and it goes through essentially what, Part A, Part B, Part C supplements are, Part D drug plans, and then of course it'll talk a little bit about Medicare Advantage, and then it finishes up with a little bit about Medicare fraud, and that's about an hour-long program. But it's well worth watching. It really is, particularly if you're getting close. And SHIP has helped a lot of different Nebraskans save a lot of money on their prescription drug plans that they can receive, on supplements, on picking the right plan for them. They also set up appointments where you can take in your listing of prescription medicines that you're on and see which plans are going to be best for you as far as the formularies they have. It's just very important that you don't miss out on this one. And like I said, this video is where? It's on our website. That's npers.ne.gov. So make sure you visited the NPERS website, at least take a little peruse through everything to make sure that you're not going to miss out on something you might want to watch. With that said, that's all that I cover today. Okay, I want to thank you for taking the time.